The American wine industry is in crisis. Sales dropped 6% in 2024 alone. Consumption has fallen for 5 consecutive years, and according to the Silicon Valley Bank State of the Wine Industry report, the sector is facing what experts call an existential threat. But here's what the wine companies do not want you to know. While they blame changing demographics and health trends for their struggles, many of these brands have been cutting corners for decades. Independent laboratory testing has found alarming levels of arsenic. Government investigations have uncovered mislabeled origins, and industry insiders admit that cheap additives are being used to disguise low-quality wine. Today, we are counting down 8 wine brands that have been caught in lawsuits, tested positive for contaminants, or engaged in practices that treat their customers like an afterthought. Every brand on this list is owned by a major corporation with billions in revenue. Every claim is backed by court documents, laboratory analysis, or verified reporting. Let us begin. Number 8. Cupcake Vineyards. Cupcake Vineyard sounds charming. The cute name and colorful labels have made it a grocery store favorite. Walk into any supermarket in America, and you will find those distinctive bottles lined up on the shelf. But this brand is owned by the Wine Group, one of the largest wine conglomerates on Earth. In 2015, Cupcake was named in a class action lawsuit alleging dangerous levels of arsenic. Laboratory testing by Beverage Grades found that multiple wines in the Cupcake lineup contained arsenic at levels exceeding EPA standards for drinking water. The testing was conducted on over 300 bottles of California wine. The lawsuit named 28 California wineries producing 83 wine products with elevated arsenic. Court documents stated that some wines contained arsenic at up to 500% more than what regulators consider safe for daily intake. While the case was eventually dismissed on technical legal grounds, the wineries never denied the arsenic findings. They simply argued that existing warning labels were sufficient. Here is what concerns consumer advocates most. Unlike bottled water, wine has no federal arsenic limit. The FDA does not require wine companies to test for arsenic or disclose its presence. You could be drinking a glass with 3 times the arsenic allowed in tap water and have no way of knowing. The agency only handles contaminants in food and beverages on a quote case-by-case basis. Cupcake Markets itself is offering wines from prestigious regions worldwide. They source from Marlborough, Mosul, and the Central Coast. But the head winemaker has admitted that all Cupcake wines are engineered to fit a specific quote, American palate unquote, profile. In other words, these are not authentic regional wines. They are industrial products designed to taste familiar regardless of origin. Cupcake Vineyards is owned by the Wine Group, a company with annual revenues exceeding $1.5 billion. They can afford better quality control. They simply choose not to require it. Number 7. Sutter Home. Sutter Home might be the most recognizable name in budget wine. Those distinctive bottles have been a staple of American kitchens for decades. The brand invented white Zinfandel in 1972 and changed American wine culture forever. But behind the family-friendly image is a troubling pattern. Sutter Home was named in the same 2015 arsenic lawsuit. Laboratory testing found elevated arsenic in more than 10 Sutter Home products, including their popular Moscato, Pinot Grigio, White Zinfandel, Sauvignon Blanc, Givert, Pink Moscato, Chenin Blanc, Sweet Riesling, White Merlot, and Merlot varieties. The complaining witnesses allege that testing laboratories confirmed dangerous contamination levels verified by 3 separate facilities. But the problems go beyond arsenic. Sutter Home is owned by Trenchiro Family Estates, a company that has also faced scrutiny for its production practices. Independent analysis has found that many mass-market wines like Sutter Home are produced with additives, including grape concentrate, coloring agents, and artificial sweeteners that never appear on the label. Here's something most wine drinkers do not realize. There are 76 different FDA-approved additives that can legally be used in American wine production. Preservatives, coloring agents, flavor enhancers, foaming agents, acidifiers and deacidifiers, case and pepsin, dimethyl dicarbonate, ammonium phosphate, sodium carboxyl cellulose, potato protein isolate, acetaldehyde, even glass, which is made from dried fish blads. None of them have to be disclosed on the bottle. Trencher responded to the arsenic allegations by stating that the safety of consumers is, quote, their first priority, unquote. They pointed to industry certifications, including safe quality food certification, but certifications are only as good as the standards they enforce. And the American wine industry has no arsenic standard to certify against. Sutter home parent company Tranchero has annual revenues approaching $1 billion. They have the resources to produce clean wine. The question is whether transparency matters to them. Number 6. Beringer has been making wine since 1876. They market themselves as a premium heritage brand with nearly 150 years of history. Their Napa Valley vineyards and historic Rhin House are tourist destinations. But do not let the history fool you. Beringer was among the wines named in the arsenic contamination lawsuit. Their Moscato and other white varietals tested positive for elevated arsenic. According to independent laboratory analysis, the company is owned by Treasury Wine Estates, one of the largest wine corporations in the world, with a market value exceeding $4 billion in operations spanning multiple continents. Testing conducted by the U.S. Per Education Fund in 2019 found glyphosate in Beringer wines. Glyphosate is the active ingredient in Roundup weed killer and has been classified as a probable human carcinogen by the World Health Organization's International Agency for Research on Cancer. Beringer Estates Moscato tested positive at levels that concerned researchers. California regulators agreed with the cancer classification and added glyphosate to the state's Proposition 65 list of carcinogens. To be clear, the amounts detected were below EPA limits, but critics argue those limits were set decades ago and may not account for cumulative exposure from multiple sources. Research has shown that 4 in 5 Americans now have detectable levels of glyphosate in their bodies. When you consider the glyphosate in your cereal, your bread, your ice cream, and now your wine, the total picture becomes more alarming. A 2018 California jury awarded $78 million to a groundskeeper who claimed Roundup exposure caused his cancer. Since then, thousands of similar lawsuits have been filed, yet glyphosate continues to be sprayed on vineyards across California. Treasury Wine Estates responded to arsenic allegations by calling them, quote, absurd, unquote. But they never denied the actual test results. They simply argued the levels were safe enough under current regulations. If you are drinking wine every night, safe enough might not be good enough. Number 5. Barefoot Wine. Barefoot is the best-selling wine brand in America. They move over 18 million cases annually and generated $664 million in U.S. sales in a single 12-month period. Their footprint logo is everywhere, but Barefoot is owned by E&J Gallo, the largest wine producer on the planet. Gallo controls more than 3% of the world's entire annual wine supply, and Barefoot has been caught up in nearly every major wine contamination story of the past decade. In the 2015 arsenic lawsuit, multiple Barefoot varietals were named among the 83 wines with elevated contamination. Independent testing by the U.S. Per Education Fund found glyphosate in Barefoot Cabernet Sauvignon, and consumer advocates have raised concerns about the use of undisclosed additives in Barefoot production. Here is what Gallo does not advertise. Barefoot wine is not vegan-friendly. The company uses animal-derived finding agents, including gelatin, egg whites, and casein in their production process. None of this appears on the label. Gallo has a controversial corporate history. In 1973, the United Farm Workers began boycotting Gallo after the company refused to renew their contract and allegedly signed a sweetheart deal with the Teamsters. Led by Cesar Chavez, an estimated 10,000 workers marched 100 miles to the Gallo winery in Modesto to protest. In 2010, 12 French winemakers were found guilty of fraud for mislabeling inferior wines sold to Gallo as Pinot Noir. The wine was sold under Gallo's Red Bicycle brand. Gallo claimed they were victims, but critics questioned how the world's largest wine producer failed to detect the fraud. When a company this large with this much quality control infrastructure still ends up in scandal after scandal, it suggests the problems are systemic. If you are finding this information valuable, please subscribe to stay informed about which brands are worth your trust and which ones are not. Number 4. Charles Shaw, Tubukchuk. Charles Shaw wine has achieved legendary status. Known as Two Buck Chuck, this Trader Joe's exclusive has sold over 800 million bottles since 2002. The price is impossibly low, currently around $3 in most states, but how do you make wine that cheap? The answer is not the oi comforting. Charles Shaw is produced by Bronco Wine Company, which was founded by Fred Franzia. The grapes come from California's San Joaquin Valley, where land is cheap because higher temperatures over ripened grapes and create inferior fruit. The wine is fermented with oak chips instead of oak barrels. The corks are among the cheapest available. The bottles are lightweight to reduce shipping costs, and harvesting is done by machine, not by hand. In February 2025, Bronco Wine Company laid off 81 workers and cited, quote, a significant downturn in business revenues. The original Charles Shaw, the actual person behind the name, has called Two Buck Chuck embarrassing and demeaning. He sold his winery under financial pressure and watched it become a symbol of industrial wine production. Charles Shaw White Zinfandel was named in the arsenic contamination lawsuit. Independent testing found arsenic at levels 3 times the EPA limit for drinking water. Again, the case was dismissed on legal technicalities, but the test results were never disputed. Here is what most people do not consider. The true cost of cheap wine is hidden. When you pay $3 for a bottle, someone else is paying the difference. It might be the environment through aggressive pesticide use. It might be workers through cost-cutting on labor. Or it might be your own health through contaminants and additives that never get tested. Number 3, Francia. If Charles Shaw is the king of cheap bottles, Francia is the king of cheap boxes. Those 5L boxes of wine have become synonymous with budget drinking. Francia sells more wine by volume than almost any brand in America. But Francia was at the center of the arsenic scandal. Francia White Grenache tested at 5 times the EPA limit for arsenic in drinking water. That was the highest level found among all wines tested by Beverage Grades Laboratory. The lawsuit alleged that Franzia and other defendants, quote, secretly poisoned wine consumers, unquote. While that language was inflammatory and the case was dismissed, the underlying test results were verified by 3 separate laboratories. Consumer reviews tell a troubling story. Customers on complaint websites describe receiving boxes of Franzia that taste like, quote, soap, unquote, or, quote, eggs, unquote. Multiple reviewers report that quality has declined significantly in recent years, with wine that is undrinkable even by budget standards. Some customers report finding wine that appears to have leaked inside the box or shows signs of oxidation. One reviewer described getting sick after drinking Franzia and traced the problem to a compromised internal bladder in the box packaging. Franzia is owned by the Wine Group, the same conglomerate that owns Cupcake. In 2025, they laid off workers and announced major restructuring due to declining revenues. When a company is cutting corners during good times and cutting staff during bad times, quality is rarely the priority. Number 2, Apothic. Apothic Red has become one of the fastest-growing wine brands in America. The dark bottles and mysterious branding appeal to consumers who want something that feels sophisticated without the price tag. But wine critics have been brutal. Tim Atkin, one of Britain's leading wine critics, called Apothic drinkable. The reason is simple. Apothic contains 16.4 g of residual sugar per liter. To put that in perspective, most wines labeled as dry contain 2 to 4 g of sugar per liter. Apothic contains roughly 4 times as much. You are essentially drinking sweetened grape juice, marketed as serious wine. Apothic is owned by E&J Gallo, the same company behind Barefoot. Gallo has mastered the art of engineering wines to appeal to American palates, which have been conditioned by decades of sugary processed foods to prefer sweetness. Here's what bothers wine professionals. Apothic is marketed as a red blend without any indication of its sugar content. Consumers who think they are choosing a sophisticated dinner wine are actually getting something closer to alcoholic grape soda. The use of grape concentrate additives like Mega Purple is suspected but never confirmed. Mega Purple is a coloring agent with 68% sugar content that can add sweetness while deepening color. Gallo does not disclose whether Apothic contains Mega Purple or similar additives. According to industry reports, Mega Purple is used by almost every low to moderate priced wine producer in America. It is added to over 25 million bottles annually. Yet consumers have no way of knowing which bottles contain it. When a company deliberately hides the sugar content and potential additives in their wine, they are treating customers like they do not deserve the truth. Number 1. Yellowtail. Yellowtail is one of the best-selling wine brands in the world. Those bottles with the kangaroo logo have become a fixture of American wine aisles. The brand sells millions of cases annually and has made Australian wine synonymous with budget drinking. But Yellowtail represents everything wrong with industrial wine production. Yellowtail pioneered the strategy of adding hidden sweetness to wines marketed as dry. Their Shiraz and other varieties contain residual sugar levels around 9 to 11 GI per liter. This is significantly higher than traditional dry wines, but never disclosed on the label. A truly dry wine contains 2 to 4 GI per liter. Yellowtail contains roughly 3 times that amount. According to wine industry analysis, Yellowtail helped create the market for sweetened dry wines that now dominates the budget category. Wines like Naomi, Franzia, and Apothic followed the Yellowtail playbook. Add sugar, do not tell anyone. Watch sales climb. The strategy worked so well that it became industry standard practice. Yellowtail is produced by Casella, family brands in Australia, but specifically engineered for American taste preferences. The company admitted they produce wines with, quote, generosity to appeal to U.S. consumers. Industry insiders translate generosity as code for added sweetness. Here is the fundamental problem. Wine labels do not require nutritional information. You can buy a bottle of wine without any idea of its sugar content, calorie count, or additive profile. Yellowtail and similar brands have exploited this regulatory gap for decades. In contrast, a can of soda must list every ingredient and calorie. Wine gets a free pass. Laboratory research conducted by consumer watchdogs found that mass-market wines often contain 20% more calories than advertised. The additional calories come from undisclosed additives used in production, coloring agents, sweeteners, thickeners, grape concentrate. None of it appears on the label. When you drink Yellowtail, you are consuming a heavily engineered product designed to appeal to taste buds trained on processed food. The kangaroo logo is cute. The actual contents are a mystery. How to spot good wine. After everything we have covered, you might be wondering if any wine is safe to drink. The good news is that plenty of quality wines exist. You just need to know what to look for. First, check the alcohol content. Wines with very low alcohol, around 8 to 9%, often contain significant residual sugar. The fermentation stopped early, leaving sugar behind. Wines at 12 to 14% are typically fully fermented and genuinely dry. This is not a perfect indicator, but it provides a useful starting point. Second, look for certification labels. USDA organic wines cannot use synthetic pesticides like glyphosate. Biodynamic certifications go even further, requiring holistic farming practices and stricter standards. These certifications are not marketing gimmicks. They require third-party verification and regular audits. Third, research the producer. Many quality wineries now publish technical sheets on their websites showing exact sugar content, farming practices, and production methods. If a winery hides this information, ask yourself why. Transparency is a sign of confidence in the product. Fourth, pay attention to price. The arsenic lawsuit found a clear pattern. The cheaper the wine per liter, the higher the arsenic content. Wines under $10 showed the most contamination. This does not mean expensive wine is always better, but it does mean that $3 wine comes with hidden costs. Fifth, consider where the grapes are grown. California's San Joaquin Valley produces most budget wine because land is cheap, but the hot climate over-ripens grapes and often requires more intervention to create drinkable wine. Cooler climate regions like Oregon, Washington, and coastal California generally produce more balanced wines with less manipulation. Sixth, avoid obvious red flags. Wines with cute names, cartoon labels, or aggressive marketing are usually engineered for mass appeal rather than quality. Names like Cupcake, Barefoot, and Apothic are designed to be memorable, not to reflect winemaking a king heritage. Seventh, taste critically. If a red wine tastes unusually sweet despite being labeled dry, it probably contains hidden sugar. If the color seems artificially dark, mega purple or similar additives may be involved. Trust your palate. If something seems off, it probably is. Finally, ask questions. Wine shop employees, sommelier, and even winery staff can often tell you which brands use transparent production methods. The wine industry is small enough that reputations matter. Producers who cut corners are usually known within the trade. The goal is not to become paranoid about every bottle. It is to become an informed consumer who can distinguish between authentic wine and industrial product. Once you know what to look for, the choice becomes clear. Conclusion. The American wine industry is facing a reckoning. Sales have declined for 5 consecutive years. Younger consumers are abandoning wine for spirits, seltzers, and cannabis. Health-conscious drinkers are increasingly skeptical of undisclosed ingredients. What we have revealed today is that many of America's most popular wine brands have been caught in contamination scandals, use undisclosed additives, or engineer their products with hidden sugar. The corporations behind these brands have revenues in the billions. They could afford transparency. They choose secrecy. Here is what you can do to protect yourself. First, look for wines labeled USDA organic. These wines cannot use synthetic pesticides like glyphosate and have stricter production standards. Second, consider wines from smaller producers who disclose their practices. Many wineries now publish technical sheets showing sugar content, additives, and farming methods. Third, vote with your wallet. When consumers demand transparency, the industry will change. The companies on this list are already struggling. They need your dollars more than you need their wine. The wine industry has enjoyed decades without meaningful regulation, no ingredient labels, no nutritional information, no arsenic limits. That era is ending. The brands that survive will be the ones that treat their customers with respect. The ones we covered today have shown they are not interested in earning that respect. Remember, the truth is not always on the label.